Thank you all so much for coming. We're super excited to be hosting this panel tonight with some student orgs, spilling the tea on food sustainability. World Food Day is a globally recognized, I don't know if you'd really call it a holiday, but just this national thing, global thing, I'm so sorry, that the United Nations started in honor of the founding of the Food and Agricultural Organization. It primarily focuses on issues regarding hunger and food insecurity, but tied to that are so many other things involving quality, equity of food systems, food distribution, having healthy diets and healthy options available globally, and then sustainability regarding food production and diets in general. And that's what some of these orgs are going to be discussing tonight, is how we all kind of have a role in that. This is in partnership with the Office of Civic Engagement here at the U. We're so happy that they've been helping us coordinate some of these other events, and there are a few more that I will be talking about more later on. First of all, let's just get started and I'll introduce myself and the panelists a little bit. After that, we'll get into more detail about what each of the individual organizations do, discuss a few questions, and then of course at the end, have time to answer any questions that any of you may have. My name is Emma. I am a sophomore here. I am representing ECO as the head of food sustainability. I am from Ohio. I'm majoring in ecosystem science and policy, Spanish, and math. And I will pass it over to Natalia.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for taking a little time from your evening to join us today. I'm looking forward to the conversation that we'll have and hearing your questions. My name is Natalia, like Emma introduced, and I'm representing the Food Recovery Network, and I am the current chapter director of our network. I am a senior this year. I'm studying ecosystem science and policy, and I'm from Miami. I am interested in food sustainability because I think there's a lot of power in the things that we have on our plate, and it's something that's really underestimated in terms of the impact that you can have as an individual. And so, yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to talking about today.
Emma?
Hi, I'm also Emma. I'm the president of Plant-Based Canes. I'm a senior this year, and I'm from Minnesota. My major is biochemistry and nutrition, and yeah, I guess I'm just interested in my own personal ability to make an impact on food sustainability and making my own eating choices more sustainable.
And finally, we have Jack.
Hello, I am Jack Urquhart, and I'm here on behalf of the Community Garden Organization.
Oh, don't worry.
So I am a senior as well, graduating this year, hopefully, and I am from Saline, Michigan. And why am I interested in sustainability? I mean, I live and breathe sustainability, but I think that's mostly because right now we are living in very unsustainable times, and I want to make a positive impact on the world, which it seems that, you know, connecting through our food and fixing problems with things that we need fundamentally to survive are the most important first steps.
Awesome, thank you. We look forward to hearing more later. I'd like to start off with just a little bit of perspective on the idea of food sustainability. It's not just growing food this way or giving food to these people in this manner. It's really this huge circle that involves food waste and redistribution, which Natalia is going to talk more about with Food Recovery Network, sustainable diets and the choices that we have available to us that Emma and Plant-Based Canes are going to discuss. And then sustainable food production is also a key element, which Jack will give a little bit more detail on. First, I would like to just highlight eco-agency a little bit. Myself and the agency as a whole, we are a branch of student government that aims to promote an environmentally progressive campus culture through focused projects and events. It consists of Eco Board, and all of the members of this board have specific roles in different areas related to sustainability, and there are some subgroups within that that also work in specifically focused areas. And obviously, we are here for food sustainability tonight. I'd like to highlight some of the various projects that we've done related to food sustainability over the course of many, many years since we were founded. We have some campus programs related to composting, a program for UV residents to compost, and then the Coffee Grounds for Plants program, where we pick up coffee grounds from Starbucks and we compost all of those in the sustainability garden, which is back in the Arboretum behind Cox, the physics area, that type of stuff. In addition to that, we work with campus dining to try to promote vegan and vegetarian options across both the dining halls and some of the other individual restaurants on campus. I want to give a shout out to Sophia, who's the current eco chair. She was head of food sustainability last year. She helped with some efforts involving more recipes in the dining hall that were vegan friendly, as well as the Beyond Burger and some other vegan options at the Rat that hopefully some of you have tried. Some things we have coming up that you might want to look out for. There will be an educational composting series coming up. We're in the works of potentially developing a food pantry, some better labeling for vegan and vegetarian options across campus, as well as if you follow us on Instagram, at Miami Eco Agency, you may have seen that it is currently the Spotlight Month for Food Sustainability. All of the committees will have their own month, but this just fittingly happens to be our month. You can learn more about us and some of our other projects there. There was just a Verde market tour posted, which is very, very cool. Highly recommend for any of your zero waste needs. If you ever have any questions regarding food sustainability on campus, I would be your contact person for student government, so you can always reach out to either myself or Sophia, who's the chair, and we can help you with whatever your concerns are. But that being said, I will move on to Food Recovery Network and let Natalia give you more information about that.
Hi, everyone. Hello again. So like Emma mentioned, I'm going to speak on behalf of Food Recovery Network, and I am the current chapter director. My connection to Food Recovery Network is actually also through Eco Agency. I also sit on the board, and I'm currently our head of waste reduction. So I'm really interested in a lot of different types of waste, and in this role, I'm able to really focus on the issue of food waste. Our chapter of Food Recovery Network is really unique because we're not necessarily an official student organization or an agency within student government and being that established. We're actually this really network of students that are working on combating food waste and local food insecurity through projects that are prioritizing social justice, environmental responsibility, community engagement, and health and well-being. And so all of those values are really prioritized in our work, whether we're doing things that are on campus or doing things that are external and in the greater Miami community, or even collaborating out of state. Because since we're this network and we're connected to a national organization, we're able to collaborate with other universities and other chapters and learn from what they're working on and also the challenges that they're navigating in combating and prioritizing these same values. So we're a really unique way of being able to engage with these issues on campus, but also outside of campus. And Food Recovery Network is something that was started long before I came to the university. And the main thing that we do in order to fulfill our mission is oversee the donation of the excess food that's produced in the dining halls and from large-scale catered events like sporting events in the Watsco Center or even graduation, and donating that food to local nonprofits that are combating food insecurity, which essentially refers to the issue when people lack the means to or the access to obtain healthy and fresh and sufficient food to fuel their really active lifestyle. So we, have always done that donation, process through the university's dining program, but Food Recovery Network as a student network is able to connect the dots for students to, number one, learn more and have access to the resources to contribute to these issues, but also to start creating change in more creative ways on campus. Some projects that we've worked on in the past are creating what's called the Food Alert, and that's a really unique program that was spearheaded by a former member of Green Committee who is now also sitting on the board. Her name is Paula, and shout out to Paula. This Food Alert is a program that she had the idea for, and it's been really successful. It's a way that students on campus who have been identified as being potentially food insecure at some point during their college experience which is not rare. Actually, 40% of college students are statistically projected to experience food insecurity at some point during their college experience. It notifies those students of any excess leftovers that are available for pickup from catered events on campus. Most of us have been to one of those events with a bunch of free food, and it's difficult to plan for exactly how many attendees you're going to have and how hungry they're going to be, and that food is all perfectly good. So it's a way for event organizers to be more sustainable and for students to get access to really, really nearby, fresh, and nutritious food. We've also collaborated, like Emma introduced, on the Food Pantry Initiative with the Association of Greek Life Organizations, and that will be kicking off very, very soon. We're actually going to start collecting donations for that next week. So that's something exciting to look out for. And we've also collaborated on different composting initiatives on campus and community partnership type of opportunities for students to get internship and volunteering and even employment opportunities in the Miami community. So I would be your contact for anything related to food insecurity, food waste, and really the intersections of environmental responsibility and social justice when it comes to food. If you'd want to get involved in that, and we'll share a little bit more contact info later. But definitely, if you have any immediate questions that you think of, feel free to send them in the chat, and I'm looking forward to getting to your questions.
All right, so I'm here on behalf of Community Garden, as I said, and our organization is primarily focused on education and access. So there's a lot of space on campus now, a lot more in the past, where we are growing food that is more of an educational space, but people can eat some of it, of course. We have the faculty-led sustainability garden in the Arboretum space, as well as a small community garden-led space in the area between Hecht and the architecture school. And our organization is mostly here to educate about how to grow food, how to use resources that are already available more efficiently. So our previous president focused a lot on the cooking element, because gardening is only useful if you can actually eat what you grow. So it's very important to educate along with action. So we also use a lot of compost materials from around campus. We're trying to integrate more with a lot of these other initiatives that you'll hear about today. So we're taking some coffee grounds for our own composting on site. It's very small scale compared to the one in the sustainability garden. But we are sort of involved in those similar projects, just sort of in a parallel dimension. So we are running as a grassroots community-led thing, whereas the sustainability garden is more from a faculty-led, official, class-oriented perspective. But it's complementary. We work together with all these organizations. My personal interests and where I'm pushing a lot of this organization is broader thinking about food usage and space usage. So there's a lot of landscaping plants and other types of things that are around in the urban setting that are edible, but that people just aren't aware of. So again, it's these foraging resources are around, but no one knows about them. So that's why education is really important for us as well. And we focus a lot on different mechanisms, like how to compost, because composting is great in theory, but people need to know exactly how it works and how to carry it out. So that's sort of our goal as an organization. And we try to involve as much of the community as possible. So we do a lot with students, obviously, but we also work with faculty, resident faculty that are living on campus and want to be able to grow food. We communicate with some of them, and then any alumni that are interested and want to reach out. It's really, we try and keep it broad so that we can involve everybody who wants to learn. And that's the whole thing. We're trying to just be a resource for anyone who wants to learn about how food is grown.
Hi, everyone. So Plant-Based Canes is a organization that aims to provide a sense of community for vegans and vegetarians and anyone who wants to eat more plant-based here at UM. We kind of focus on the 3 different reasons why most people want to eat more plant-based, which is for their health, for the environment, and for the animals. So of course, we'll be focusing on the environmental aspect of that today. But first and foremost, Plant-Based Canes is a social community meant for like dialogue and talking about different plant-based issues. We usually talk about restaurants around town that are opening up, share recipes and tips on how to be more plant-based. And we also like to talk about the greater issues regarding eating plant-based, like if you're traveling abroad, will it be accessible to eat plant-based? What are the social implications of having access to plant-based foods and things like that. We also like to host events like farmers markets trips or picnics at the university's farmers market. Those have been limited this semester because of the COVID restrictions, but typically we also like to host movie screenings or documentary screenings. We've had cooking classes in the past. We also do collaborations with the dining hall and give them an opportunity to show us their new plant-based recipes. And we get to try out a lot of different interesting foods. I've been vegan for 5 years, and it's really nice to have a space on campus to really talk with other people who want to eat more sustainably. And so my beliefs and my opinions about eating plant-based have constantly been evolving while I've been here. So it's always nice to hear about how other people are approaching eating more sustainably.
Amazing. Now that we've heard from some of these orgs and a little bit about their background, we're just going to open the floor for the 4 of us to discuss some questions that might be relevant to students on campus. The first one is, how can students work to reduce food waste?
I guess I could start with this one because I feel like it's right up my alley. So I'll touch on a couple things because there are a few really simple ways that students can make a big impact right away. And the first one I'm going to say is, especially if you're eating in the dining halls, but also when you're eating at home, be conscious of what you're putting on your plate. I like to say, serve as much as you'll eat, but eat as much as you'll serve. So if, the buffet gets you really excited and something looks really, really good, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should fill your plate all of the way and then just discard what you don't want to eat. Because yes, that is satisfying you, but there is so much energy and cost and social implications of, that are going to waste directly when you're throwing that food away. If you think about all of the time that it took to produce that food, to transport it, to prepare it, and all of the other people that could have had access to it, but you got to have it on your plate, it starts to become a bigger issue. So definitely just being a little bit more conscious of the things that you are eating and the things that you are discarding is a good first step. Now, once you start realizing those things, it's easy, in terms of like a buffet and not discarding so many of those foods. But there are also some more creative ways that you can take it into your own hands. And so my first suggestion is always for students to also, and anybody really, to try to get a little more creative with the things that they're making for themselves. Because when you cook your own food, you have full control of what is going to waste, what you are using, where you are sourcing it from. All of those different things are in your control. So if you want to waste less food, a lot of the food waste is also going to be created during the preparation. If you are eating a vegetable, is it being peeled? Because a lot of the times if you wash a vegetable really well, it doesn't need to be peeled a ton. Potatoes sometimes are peeled, but the skin is perfectly edible. Same with, carrots and, cutting the stem from broccoli. Common things like that are staples in an American diet are often made an unnecessary source of food waste. And so when you're preparing your own foods, it's good to just be a little bit more conscious. Obviously, I'm not going to encourage you to start eating banana peels right off the off the bat. But there are some things, like I mentioned, the carrots, the potatoes, the broccoli stems, all those things are perfectly good. And it's just kind of a norm to get rid of them. But if you start making your own food, it's a good way to start getting a little bit more conscious of those things that are going to waste.
Yeah, going along with Natalia's point of being deliberate about what you're putting on your plate and what you're cooking, it's also good to be deliberate when you're shopping too. So if you're buying your own food, going to the grocery store with a list and with possible recipes that you're going to make that week or something is a great way to not just be buying things that look good and that sit in your fridge until they go bad. Also, most expiration dates on food, now don't hold me liable to this, but most expiration dates are not, your food's still fine after the expiration date. So I'd say use your best judgment to determine whether foods are good, maybe by looking at them or smelling them. But usually the best by dates are a very conservative date. So you can definitely push how long your food can last past that date. And then also freezing food can help preserve it longer. If you don't think you're going to be eating it all at once, or if you meal prep something ahead of time, you can definitely freeze food and make it last weeks longer than it would have just in the fridge.
In addition to that, you also are able to freeze compost if you're in a situation where you have food waste and maybe you live here in the dorms on campus and you don't have something that's accessible every day for you to compost. You can freeze your compost for like 2 to 3 weeks is best, and then compost it afterwards. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jack. I didn't know what you were going to say.
No, it's okay. I mean, I was going to add the compost angle. We're talking about food waste, and obviously like the first step is reduce and reuse. But you can't recycle food waste, but you can compost pretty much most edible things, if it's plant-based at least. And a lot of things that you discard as part of the cooking process, things that you necessarily discard, like maybe the greens on a carrot, those are completely compostable. And so I think it's a lot about learning how to do that. And for a student, it's hard to compost necessarily because our composting infrastructure at the university is pretty lightweight right now. But if it's something that anyone listening is passionate about, you can definitely reach out either to the community garden or to the faculty-led garden space and ask if you can bring your compost there. We can't take every student that does that, but no one really asks, and so it's a great first step.
I'd also like to add that on the composting note, there's an organization in Miami called Back to Earth, with a 2 as the 2. And they're like a small composting company in Miami that has drop sites throughout Miami. So if you have a car and can get to those drop sites, I think that's also a great source. That's what I do at my house.
That's a great suggestion. Actually, we have a member of our leadership team at FRN that's looking to hopefully have a more concrete relationship with some of those external organizations that are doing composting. So students can have, easy contacts and just a process to go through. So I second that. And I also wanted to add something I recently started doing in my fridge. Emma talked about buying things and having a list. Sometimes you also buy a list, but you don't necessarily have an empty fridge when you go to the grocery store. You still have a couple things left over, and making sure that you keep those things that you still had in the fridge separate, whether it's in like a separate drawer in your fridge or a side of a shelf, and making sure that you eat things in the order that you bought them, because sometimes you buy things and they look really good, or you're excited about this recipe you're going to try, but those greens that you had from the week before are in the back of the fridge and then they go bad before you can eat them. So no need to be OCD about it, but it's good to kind of eat things in the order that you purchase them so that you don't risk having them go bad.
Yeah, actually, something else that we push a lot with gardens is, sometimes you produce too much food that you can't eat. And rather than necessarily composting all of it, it's important to think about maybe preserving that food. And so, it's a bit more of an investment. You can put it in cans, that's relatively simple. You can also ferment it, which, that takes some skill and learning, but it's a good investment because, if you find that something is about to go bad, but you aren't ready to eat it, you can preserve it and then maybe stretch that time span when you can use it by another 2 weeks or even like years.
For sure. And I think the theme that we're all kind of talking about is the idea that food waste really is at all steps of the process. It's thinking about a plan for if you are going to cook and have food that maybe you could compost. How are you going to be able to compost it before you even buy that food? What should you be buying? How much are you going to be able to consume? And then, of course, in the preparation and the serving part of making sure that you are eating what you're being able to serve yourself to reduce waste, and then making sure you're able to maximize the lifespan of it as well and get everything out of it. Awesome. And with that, I'll move on to the next question, which is about how can students adapt more environmentally friendly diets?
So I can start this one off. So I'm sure many of you have heard that a plant-based diet is more environmentally friendly than eating animal products. And this is predominantly because of the intensity that, or like the resource intensity of animal products. So if you're going to grow a cow up to be the size and age to slaughter it, you're going to have to put a lot of water into it. You're going to have to feed it a lot of food. It's going to emit a lot of methane gas. And you're going to get a relatively small amount of food from that compared to if you were to put the same resources into plants. So that is the main reason that a plant-based diet can be more environmentally friendly. But I think more important than just going completely plant-based right off the bat, honestly, I think going vegan cold turkey is a bad idea because it's not going to be very easy, especially if you haven't educated yourself about how to do it. And if you're switching from a very meat-focused diet to a very plant-based diet, you're probably not going to enjoy it at first. So I think the first step to adapt a more environmentally friendly diet is just to incrementally increase the amount of plants you're eating and reduce the amount of animal products that you're eating. And do it in a way that you enjoy, not that you feel forced to do or that you don't like. Like, don't go to salads if you don't like salads. That's only one way to eat plant-based. There's many other ways to reduce animal consumption while still enjoying what you're eating.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, there's, even though there's a pretty clear distinction between, plants are definitely more sustainable to eat than meat product, there are relatively sustainable ways to produce meat. And so even if, you find that you can't give up like this 1 or 2 meals a week where you need some meat to satisfy you, there's pigs, if they're raised certain ways, can convert plant food waste into meat. You can raise chickens and cows in ways that are much more sustainable and better for the environment than factory farms, which is where almost all of our meat comes from. I will say it's very difficult to find those sources, so it's something that takes a lot of work, and it's not something I've really been able to do in Miami because I do eat some meat, and it's very, very difficult, but it is still possible. So I think it's a matter of education. If you find that plant-based isn't necessarily your thing, which I'm not sure that it is everybody's thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that there's many ways to become more environmentally friendly with like buying local. If you can find local meat, local eggs, local produce, that's of course going to be more environmentally friendly than eating foods that are shipped in from other countries or from across the country. So yeah, there's more than one way to eat more environmentally friendly, and it doesn't just include eating plant-based.
Absolutely. I was going to tack on to that one more way. All the things that are locally sourced, things that are produced in a way that is regenerative, that isn't just monoculture, which is the most common. Even when we're talking about growing vegetables and plant-based foods, grains, all those kinds of things. If it's just the same crop being grown on the land, it's exhausting the same type of nutrients, and the land is not being stewarded in a way that is as responsible as something that is diverse and is growing, a plot, but is diverse and is growing a lot of different types of foods. and it's not new at all actually. It has a lot of roots in indigenous culture, and a lot of less developed countries still farm this way more than we do in the United States. But this form of like monoculture cropping is a lot more environmentally degrading, and advocating for more regenerative agriculture, supporting farms that are implementing these regenerative practices are like a small way. Like Jack said, it's not the majority right now, but when we are making these choices with respect to what we get to put on our plate, if you're able to make that choice and you have the access to it, it's one way that you can support, for their success to ripple into for other farms and other businesses to adopt similar practices.
Yeah, so you all may be wondering, well, where do I find local produce? Where do I find local food? There's actually quite a lot of CSAs around Miami. So those are community supported agriculture, and they're usually small, sometimes organic farms that you buy into the farm, and then they use that money to buy their crops and their seeds, and then you get fresh produce either every week or every other week or whatnot. And so that's a nice way to support local produce and local farming. Also, there's places like Verde Market, which Natalia talked about earlier, or Emma talked about earlier, which is a great place to buy in bulk and also get local eggs.
I'll add one more option to that. There's also some companies that provide, in terms of addressing food waste, a lot of the food that conventional grocery stores like Publix or even Aldi reject because they're a little bit ugly or misshapen or too small or too large to meet their standards, are sold by other companies. One that we support at our chapter Food Recovery Network is Hungry Harvest. A more common one that you may be familiar with is Imperfect Produce, but it's the same concept. And they actually partner with a couple of CSAs in Miami right now. They're running a collaboration with Health in the Hood, and they're a really great organization that works on, building community gardens. I see some people are sending some good resources in the chat, so definitely check all that out. But if you're interested in, Healthy Harvest, my apologies, Healthy Harvest, they do collaborations that are local, and you can support community gardens or other CSAs, in Miami, or if you're not from Miami, in other areas. They're all across the nation, and it's a good way to kind of address both at the same time.
Yeah, I'd love to just add on to that real quick. The best way to ensure that something is local is if you grow it, harvest it, or catch it yourself. So, you can get involved in the community garden, and then usually as part of that, you can take home some share of produce from that. I mean, not everybody has that option or that luxury or that time to spare, but it's something important to think about. I'd also love to add, with the monoculture aspect of farming, regenerative agriculture, you need diverse crops. And part of that is, maybe you should think about diversifying your diet, not just eating the same grains, which that's a health thing. It's good to diversify your diet for you, but it also can help the environment. Most people would never think about eating insects, but a lot of evidence shows that, insect agriculture is a very sustainable way to produce protein. And so it's, there's things maybe outside the box that are worth exploring.
For our final question, we will talk about how students can promote more sustainable food production.
Yeah, I guess I can start with this one. Like we've sort of touched on a lot of sustainable production methods, I would say already. Obviously, first is like, if you can grow your own, you have control over the input, so you know how sustainable it is. But like I said, not everybody has that luxury. Luckily, now we live in a time when there's a lot of different, everyone knows organic, everyone knows a lot of these sort of certifications. There's sustainable seafood certifications that are sort of a regulation approach to figuring out if what you're eating is sustainable. Obviously, eating local, we talked about that. I would like to say it's also important to learn about sort of what's new. You know, there's regenerative agriculture, which we've mentioned, which doesn't really have a certification associated with it. I mean, there are some up and coming certifications, but nothing that's widely recognized. And so it's some of those things you have to seek out, and you have to read about the story of the food, not just a label on it. And a lot of the places that do regenerative agriculture generally tell you about it, and they want to tell you about it because they're passionate about it. I know, and even it's not just food. Patagonia, a clothing company, has a regenerative organic agriculture certification that they promote for their clothing lines, which I think is great. Annie's is a brand that I know does regenerative grain production for some of their products, and they'll have a discussion of that on the box, sort of. So, you know, really look at what you're eating and think about how it's being produced.
I want to also encourage people to think also a little bit outside of your purchases, because it doesn't just have to be your buying power, it's also the power of your voice and the power of your example. You can do things like write a letter to the editor, or an op-ed, or host a discussion with your peers, or literally just bring it up at the dinner table with your friends or your family, and talk about these issues and why they're important to you, or why they may be important to someone else. Because I think Emma brought up a really cool point about how Plant-Based Canes has been a really great community, just to foster that kind of dialogue, and that, you know, her view on this has evolved. I think a lot of our views on these kinds of things should evolve. Not only should we be open to like learning more about these things, but also as different methods arise, we have different things that we can be supporting and different options that we can be advocating for. So, you know, if this is important to you and it's something that you feel is underrepresented in your community or isn't accessible to people, it's something that you can also use your voice to promote in the people that are already around you, or, you know, in the greater community. Like I mentioned, if you want to write for a local newspaper, you can write an op-ed about, you know, why this is important and how it's connected to some of the contemporary issues that we're seeing, because it very much is connected to things like health and well-being and social justice and environmental responsibility and all of these things that, you know, are much, much bigger issues.
Yeah, I think Natalia and Jack have pretty much covered it, but I think it's just like important to educate yourself and never think that you know it all. Like never think, okay, I've learned this, this, and this about sustainability. I'm sustainable now, because things are constantly changing, and the social environment's changing. What we know about different like agricultural practices is constantly changing. Like for instance, avocados, they used to not be as popular as they are today. But now that they are so popular, the practice of farming avocados has become less sustainable because forests are being chopped down to plant new avocado trees. And so there's some deforestation going on with the avocado industry. So that makes you reconsider, how many avocados do I need to eat in a week or whatever. So things like that, just constantly checking up on the things that you're eating and how you can improve your own practice.
Now that we've heard from these wonderful speakers who've been so articulate about all of these just various things that we're talking about involving food sustainability, I'd like to give a few minutes that we can talk about how you could get involved if you're interested in learning more and contributing. For Eco Agency, I didn't go into too much detail about our structure earlier. For our board and then Green Committee, who work again on all those like various initiative ideas, we have people set for the semester. There will be opportunities there at the beginning of each semester, depending on who graduates or who moves on. At this time, if you're looking to get more involved, I would direct you to Pavan, who is also on this call. He is the director of EcoReps. If you want to email him for more information, I put his email there. And if you just want to learn about Board and Eco in general, you can always look for us online, and again, follow us on social media there at Miami Eco Agency.
Yeah, regarding plant-based canes, find us on Engage, join our email list. We'd love to have you at our meetings. I believe our next meeting is November 1st before the election. So maybe we can have a topic regarding all of that. We have general body meetings every 3 weeks. So come find us then. We do have events in between those weeks. We'll probably be having a lunch at the dining hall sometime soon. So look out for that. If you have any specific questions, email me. My email's on the page.
And as far as anything related to Food Recovery Network, like I mentioned, we're a little unique because we're not an official student org. So to join, you don't need to add us on Engage or anything like that. You have a couple different options. I encourage that you visit our link tree. Oddly enough, we have a lot of different links there for different event opportunities, but also the ways that you can join our network are either through our email list to find out about all of the bigger events that we have. We have general body meetings once a month, but we have all kinds of different, more creative events all the time, every month, frequently. And we also have a group me chat where I share, frequent opportunities, whether it's related to volunteering or maybe a job at a local organization, or just things that are happening on campus for students to get involved in. If you have any questions related to how to get involved or something that you'd want to work on in collaboration with us, also feel free to email me. I put my email there.
Yeah, with Community Garden, I mean, we have weekly garden maintenance times where you can show up on Saturdays at 10 a.m. And Jorge, who I believe is on the call, is handling the scheduling for that. So his email is listed here. Also, you're welcome to follow us on Engage. We'll send updates to our Engage membership, which is most orgs do it. And then we have Facebook as well, which is just Community Garden, Human Community Garden. Should be able to find us there if you want to reach out outside of those means. So if you're not a student, that's a good way to contact us.
Before we move on to questions, I'd like to just take a moment to highlight some of the other events we're having this week for World Food Day. The entire week, we are promoting a tropical food crunch. This is something we would usually do in person, but now we have the opportunity to do it over social media. And the idea is to take a picture of yourself biting. We do a tropical fruit here, fit our local theme, and it just represents the awareness of everything we've talked about regarding World Food Day. Obviously, we are here at the student org panel tonight, but tomorrow there will be a keynote speaker at 12:15. It's Art Friedrich. He's the founder of Urban Oasis Project, which focuses on sustainable agriculture and hunger in the local community. He's been doing a lot of work recently revolving getting fresh food to people who've struggled due to COVID and how that's impacted their family. So that will be very, very informative. I'd highly recommend it tomorrow. Again, that's at 12:15. I will send a link in the chat to register for that if you would like to attend. And then finally, there are some recipes that are up on the Green U website. Emma's helped out with some of those, but if you're looking to get some vegan cooking in, like if you're looking for ideas, there are some great tutorials there to learn more and cook alongside them. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions. If you still have some, feel free to put those in the chat, but I'll just go in order of when they were submitted, and then any of the panelists, you're welcome to chime in if you have thoughts on them. The first one is about being a flexitarian and looking at the idea of, if somebody is vegan or vegetarian, and let's say they go to a restaurant and maybe they're accidentally served something with animal products. It's hard both ways. It's like you personally don't eat those things. Maybe you feel morally wrong about it, but at the same time, you could contribute to food waste if you decide to send it back. What are your thoughts on that situation, and what might you do?
This is a great question, and it's happened to me many, many times. Honestly, when I first went vegan, I really treated it like a dogma, like I had to stick to being vegan all the time. And since then, I've kind of relaxed it and have formed more of the mentality of every meal I'm making the choice to eat plant-based. And so for me personally, if this happened at a restaurant, if it was like cheese or dairy, I probably would eat it still. If it was meat, I don't know if I would eat the meat. I'd probably just put it to the side, but still eat the rest, just because, I mean, since it is already made, there's not much I can do about like the animal on the plate. But just for me personally, I wouldn't eat the meat, but I would eat the dairy. So it's kind of personal preference. And I would just encourage people to not feel so down about it, and maybe just make a comment to the waiter or something, just to let them know so maybe they can improve next time. But I feel like making a big fuss about it doesn't improve the cause of promoting plant-based eating.
Yeah, I'll just say as someone who eats meat, I never turn down when someone offers me part of their meal. So sometimes it's good if you're with friends to just ask if someone else wants to eat it. That would be my approach. I'm also not a vegetarian though, so I would eat it. But
Someone else just said that in that chat too. See if you can pass it on to someone else. There's probably somebody who would love to have it. Next question involves protein consumption. A lot of people try to aim to get enough protein in their diet to be healthy, and we typically associate meat with protein. What are some plant-based foods that also are high in protein or could be a good alternative if you choose to not eat meat?
I can speak to this. Oh, sorry, Emma, did you want to, you can go first.
No, you go ahead.
I can speak to this one a little bit because I live in a very, I live in a very meat-centric household. My family's Argentinian, which if you don't know, it's like steak is like part of the culture. And yeah, it's just part of my family and, you know, our traditions and things like that. So a lot of the times, you know, meat is very central in our diet, especially in Western countries. And that has fed into a lot of our popular culture and a lot of the influence. You mentioned, I saw in your question, you know, and a lot of information that is, you know, targeting people who are weight training or, you know, working out more intensively, that they need to get certain amounts of protein that are higher than the average person. I would really encourage you, if you haven't already seen the documentary Game Changers, super, super relevant. And it's super informative, but also, and like facts-based, but it's also uplifting. And it gives a lot of great ideas and kind of context around the issue of promoting, you know, meat as something that is necessary for athletic performance. Just as a personal note, we want to remind you, of course, that like carbohydrates are your source of energy and they're essential if you're going to be doing any form of intensive training. So, you know, things that are super, super high in protein and have virtually no carbohydrates aren't necessarily essential for you to perform well either. But I mean, a couple things that are, you know, more protein rich that I at least include in my diet are things like black beans. You know, different types of beans will have different ratio of protein to carbs, but black beans tend to be pretty good. Also, if you're going to buy tofu, if you go like more firm, they have like a whole range of like extra firm, mildly firm, whatever, you know, all that. The more firm you go, it tends to be more higher in protein. And also things like edamame or nuts and seeds have a good amount of protein, as well as whole grain bread. But I'll pass to Emma because I'm sure that she has good tips too.
Well, I think you covered most of the meat alternatives as far as protein. So beans, legumes, seeds, nuts. There now are a lot of faux meats on the market. So Impossible Burger, Beyond Meat, those kind of things that do supply a good amount of protein. They're also more highly processed as well. So that might come into consideration when you're trying to figure out where you want to get your protein from. But definitely if you're trying to eat a good amount of seeds, nuts, legumes, and beans throughout your week, you're going to get plenty of protein.
yeah, I want to just add something about, you know, we talk a lot about like meat and vegetable as these really strict categories for food, but I encourage people to sort of look on the edges. there's a yeast and fungus and all kinds of microorganisms, which oftentimes are just in our food anyways, whether we like it or not. But, eating mushrooms, there's yeast powder, all kinds of other ways to take in meat. And I mean, depending on how you defining meat, is it an ethical, is it for sustainability? There's a lot of seafood, like oysters are extremely sustainable. They're really beneficial. Oyster farming is really beneficial to the environment. And that's a really high protein source as well. I've already mentioned insect culture. If you're working out, I know they have insect powders, which, it is meat, but it's not like cows or pigs where it's, really that intensive animal agriculture is really detrimental. You can find places on the edge where you can maintain sustainability or your ethical concerns while still, taking in similar amounts of protein as you would find in meat.
A question I feel like is related to this is from Teddy, our sustainability director, and he asked, what's your take on dairy? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say my take on dairy is it's sort of the same thing with meat. I think that there are sustainable ways to do it, but our concentrated animal feedlot operations are definitely detrimental, and they have those for dairy. So it's sort of a similar problem. I'll say that, with dairy, you're growing out the animal, and then after the grow out phase, you continue to use it. And so it is, slightly more sustainable. But if you're dead set on eating dairy, and I would definitely I would push people to find, a great thing to look for in dairy production is you want to find, like with cows, when you grow them, you want them to eat grass. You don't want to feed them grain. And so if you can find, grass-fed dairy operations, or particularly like intensive grazing, where they're getting all of their nutrient from grass, and it's being raised in a way where it's comparable to grain production in its efficiency. But yeah, I think it's still not.
Yeah, I do want to say, I think that something that, I've found to be effective, at least with the people that I know and with myself, is not to be too hard on yourself, unless obviously you have an allergy, about these things, because they're really not that rigid. And I'm never going to tell you that a certain food is, bad, and it's a bad food, because food is not inherently bad. That's just not going to be productive for like your mindset when you're like trying to have a more environmentally friendly diet, or more plant-based diet, or more ethical diet, whatever it is. If you're currently eating or consuming dairy in different ways, try to think about the ways that maybe you don't notice it as obviously, like the milk in your coffee or the whey protein that you put in the shake. Like, try to replace those things with the plant-based alternatives instead of, I don't know, like the cheese that you're just eating by itself. And then gradually phase in alternatives. Dairy is a good one because I feel like we have so many alternatives for a lot of the different ways that we eat dairy, that are becoming more readily accessible. But at the same time, whether it's because you're a student or, for other reasons that you have limited access to these alternatives, don't be super, super hard on yourself. And, look at it, like Emma said, like a choice. Like, you're making a choice, and, there are some things that you can change, but I wouldn't cross the line of labeling foods as like inherently good or inherently bad.
Yeah, one last little point to add. So if we're talking about sustainability wise and environmentally friendly, dairy milk in comparison to some plant milks is pretty comparable. Almond milk is very water intensive, and may almost consume more water than it takes to produce dairy milk. And also soy. A lot of soy farming does result in deforestation. So I guess when it comes to choosing what milk product you're gonna buy and you're trying to be sustainable, it's not just dairy or plant-based. There's many different plant-based. There's almond, coconut, soy, oat milk, which is my favorite because it's the best tasting and the most sustainable. But so yeah, I guess it's just not just thinking about dairy or non-dairy.
It looks like we have one final question we'll address quickly before we wrap up at 8. Obviously, this is open to everybody, but I feel like it's right up Natalia's alley. And it's, how do you reduce your usage of plastic food packaging? You mentioned bulk grocery stores, but do you have any other tips?
I guess one tip is to try to eat more whole foods rather than pre-processed foods. Because usually, like if you're in a grocery store, the things that have the least amount of packaging are the produce, the stuff in the bulk area, and usually like the like meat counters. So if you can eat foods that have been processed less and have had to be packaged less thoroughly, then I think that's a good way to reduce, as well as trying to shop in bulk and bring your own containers and things like that.
Yeah, I see a lot of places, you'll see alternatives. People will figure out ways to use wood or cardboard in their packaging more than plastic. And so I think, this is another one of those things where you can kind of vote with your dollar sometimes. Obviously, not all the times. Sometimes you have to take the plastic, but some companies will deliberately change their packaging to address this. And so, if you support those companies, then you encourage other people to do the same. So it's keep an eye out for it, I guess, is most of it.
That looks like all we have to share tonight. Once again, thank you all so much for coming. I hope you learned something, and maybe you will choose to learn more about some of these organizations or just do some of your own research. If you have any other questions, you can always reach out to any of us. This presentation will be available on the World Food Day page, which is on the Greenview website. Other than that, everybody have a great night. And I also want to thank our panelists for coming. You were so articulate. Thank you for sharing your evening with us.